My guests today are Dilip Shanghvi, Executive Chairman of Sun Pharma, and Glenn Saldanha, Managing Director at Glenmark Pharma. Between them, they have built two of India's most consequential pharmaceutical companies, one through ruthless capital discipline and the instinct to occupy territory nobody else wanted, the other through a 25-year bet on innovation so unfashionable it made investors furious. Both were driven by the same ethos. If Indian pharma has to make it big, it can't play it safe. Today, of course, the compunctions are different. Big pharma is in a quiet panic. Patents are expiring, pipelines are thin, and the Chinese, earlier dismissed for copied innovation, are suddenly the ones doing the landmark deals. AI is in every lab. The old rules no longer apply. In this conversation, we try to understand how much India, the pharmacy of the world, will matter in the next century of drug making. Listen on, it's Monday, the 23rd of Feb. I am your host, it is Pharma Editor Vikas Dandekar. Welcome to the latest episode of Corner Office Conversation. Mr. Shanghvi sir, you started, with just two products. You mentioned two representatives, one of which was you. And because no one was doing neurology, you were doing it. At that time, did you really think that it will become so big, 45 billion market cap, close to 60,000 crore in revenues?
No, I don't think we. And that reflects my conviction that all of us have potential for doing far more than what we end up doing. It's important to find a way to get out of your comfort zone and take risks, take bets on future so that you can achieve far more than what you would achieve without that.
Right. So you also mentioned that while efforts are important, you also need a lot of luck. Where did you find luck and where did it not work for you?
No, I think biggest element of luck would be that default we got into relatively less competitive therapy areas, which were also small markets. But as India continued to evolve and chronic diseases, aging-related diseases started becoming a bigger part of the business in the country, it allowed us to grow along with that growth. So let's say when the industry was growing at around 3, 4, 5%, these therapy areas were growing at 20, 25%. And we were present there. We rode the wave to growth. We went into this business by default or because that was the only thing we could have done. And we were at the right place, right time.
Absolutely. To you, Glenn, last year was like a big milestone year for you and for the industry. $1.9 billion deal, AbbVie. A lot of patients came in there, but through a lot of challenges. I still remember 2004 Forest Labs. Going into that history to now, and there was a kind of a slump time when things looked like, okay, where is it all heading? Was the business model itself faulty? Because we know what happened with the investors. What gave you the courage? How did you really take on these bets? Must have been a very tough situation for you.
I think a lot of my learnings came when I was in the US, actually. So I used to work at Eli Lilly in the US and then PricewaterhouseCoopers in consulting, right? That journey helped me a lot in truly defining that to be a global pharma company, you have to have innovation and science at the backbone of it, right? And then, of course, we started with small molecules. 2004, we did Forest. And then we did a number of licensing deals on that journey, right? I think the first 5-7 years, we did a lot in terms of out licensing, got significant cash flows. And then the next decade was really hard, right? The 2010 to 2020 was extremely tough, where whatever we did failed. We had lots of setbacks, lots of failures, clinical trials failing, investors yelling at us, right? Saying you guys are putting so much of capital and good capital. And we even spun out IGI during that time into a US company, which is our innovative Iconos Glenmark Innovation, 100% owned subsidiary, into a US company with a vision that we will raise capital in the US markets. And even that didn't work out. So we continued funding it, continued pruning the portfolio until we ended up with one ISB 2001, which we think is a world-class asset. So it's been a 25-year journey for us on innovation. And today, that's the reward that we are seeing out of it.
Both of you, now we are seeing the kind of lift that innovative products can do. So you mentioned that, you spend hundreds of millions of dollars on one product, you get a major jump in your revenues versus $2 to $3 million that you do for each ANDA. It also grows, but it doesn't change the game. Going forward, sir, do you think that composition will change dramatically? You're already 20% of your revenues coming from innovative products. That question will also be to Glenn. So where do you start?
I mean, the Glenmark journey is we are constantly trying to move up the value chain. And if I look out over the next 5 to 10 years, right, with the number of innovative assets coming into commercialization, right, some of it we in-licensed, the 3 oncology products. And then, of course, ISB 2001, we still hold all the emerging market rights for it. So that will be a commercial launch for us in all India and all emerging markets. And then on the back of that, we have several other assets that we are working on. So I think the next 5 to 10 years will be a very rich period in terms of innovation for Glenmark, in terms of commercialization. So far, all our efforts, the last 25 years of mine have been in the discovery end and the clinical end, right? Now we are actually moving up into more, late phase development and commercialization. So that's the next wave of how the next 5 to 10 years will work for us for the company.
I share the excitement which Glenn has about future. Our focus is to find a way to grow our innovative product pipeline from, let's say, 20% of business to becoming a bigger part of the company as we move forward. And when I look at both what we are doing within the company, development of GLP also based on phase 2A study, that initial indication on non-blinded data we have, I think it's a differentiated GLP. So very excited about how the composition of business will continue to evolve with a greater part of future growth also coming from innovative products.
That landscape has been changing quite a lot. I mean, once we hear about twice a month injection, the next time we hear it's probably a month, once 4 weeks. And so obesity market is like blowing in a big way. I was hearing a discussion a couple of weeks ago. Somebody spoke about Eli Lilly being $1 trillion company. Before the next $1 trillion comes from another company, probably Lilly will be in the next $1 trillion. So it will become a $2 trillion company. So it's like really changing the game in a big way. Environment is actually gearing up for a big change in innovation. We saw the FM budget also mentioning a lot about biosimilars, a lot about 1,000 clinical trial sites which will be accredited. We had the Honorable DOP Secretary also speak about a bunch of things. Do you think this is going to be a new start? And we also saw a lot of industry discussions happening. So where do we go from here?
No, I think clearly we see regulatory changes which should overcome many of the historical hurdles by which, let's say, relatively low number of clinical trials were being done in India. Because we have a large patient pool and skilled manpower to conduct clinical studies. And I think it will also create a scientific capability within the within the country so that we can leverage that. Also, I think the PRIP scheme, the desire to improve the innovation component of business for Indian pharma. I'm quite excited about the future, which is going to be different from our past.
The one element which is critical is to also look at talent, right, very closely and see how we can bring back people of Indian origin, to come and set up companies here, more startups. That's a critical element which will further catapult the innovative aspects in the country. I mean, it's great that the government is playing a much more dominant role today, right? With the budget, the PRIP scheme, RDI, many other schemes, ANRF, lots of good activities happening. We have a lot of catch up though with the rest of the world, right? Because obviously US and China are so far ahead, right? In terms of the innovative capabilities. But I think we can definitely aspire to be in the short term, right? To be among the top 3-4 players, right? Over the next 10-15 years.
Right.
And also, I think to add to what Glenn says is that how do we get international companies to invest in R&D in India? Because if you look back, say 40, 50 years back, at least 4 or 5 companies had research infrastructure in India.
Yes.
Today we have 0. So how do we find a way to attract these companies to invest in India? Because when you go abroad and go to their research infrastructure, you have large number of people of Indian origin working in these companies. So it's not that the talent is not there in India, but how do we create an environment by which this talent delivers the value which they are able to deliver in Europe or USA? How can they deliver that in India? And that is what will lift up the overall capability.
That's where exactly, a lot of challenges come, because Glenn, you faced the big blows from the investors, the pipeline, which was so rich. And in fact, I keep hearing that even in the US, the pipelines are actually valued. That didn't happen. So how do you, a couple of things that you would like to see changing in the Indian context?
Capital markets will do their own thing, right? I'm hoping that in this next decade, capital markets will evolve, right, to looking at innovative assets very differently than they did in the last decade or 2 decades, right? So that transformation will happen. We need a few more successes, like our deal with AbbVie, landmark deal, $700 million upfront. That built a lot of confidence. And I think if we have a few more successes coming out of India, you will see capital markets starting to value this, right? Innovation is a long game. You have to be there for the long term. And you have to stay focused on trying to come up with something transformational.
Running a business based on what investors think that you should be doing is a fool's errand. But at the same point of time, unless and until we get sector investors to invest in Indian pharma companies, it will be very difficult for creating an environment where people will start giving value for pipeline. Because if you see any of the analyst report for any pharma company in India, you have only valuation based on cash flow. So how do we change that and we start getting value for pipeline and all is what I think is the change that which is required. And for that, we need to have a critical mass of companies and a large number of innovative assets. So like if you have 50, 100 drugs in India in different stages of development, the analysts and investors in India also will learn how to value these assets.
One of the things that we have been actually hearing a lot in the last couple of years is use of AI. US companies are doing that a lot. People are actually talking about de novo drug design, of how do we actually get to a new drug all from the past data. Your thoughts, do you want to apply those latest tools? What would be the best ways to take your research pipeline to the next level?
The key issue is how can we accelerate the development? Because when your competitors are using AI to bring a product to market faster, then if you're late, it will not help. I think a great opportunity is to ultimately solve for problems which current drugs cannot solve so that patients can benefit.
I think AI will play an important role going forward. I would say in the short term in the small molecule space, right? Small molecule discovery. And I think biologics, it'll take a little longer, but it'll play an important role in the whole research cycle, right? Whether it's clinical trials, whether it is in molecular modeling, drug design, various aspects, right, of the whole research process. It'll still take much more time for the biologic side, but I think small molecules, it can play an important role.
Let's say filing timelines, analyzing your phase 3 data and submitting the CSR and all of that much faster. Typically, it takes a few months. How can you condense that to a few weeks?
Right.
And the technology exists,
Right.
capability exists. So, how do you leverage all of that so that from your first patient in phase 3, recruiting patients faster, completing the studies faster, and filing the products faster once the studies are done can potentially give you 1.5 year of time advantage, and which can be significant value. So
Right.
I see that there's no option but for us to use AI in drug discovery and research.
Right. So a question on the global, research landscape. We just saw like a European company seeing a change at leadership. Somebody commented that, boardrooms are brutal, killing fields. We saw a similar situation on the obesity front. People have been expecting a lot more from European and American companies. The pipelines are really actually fading there also. And so we see so many Chinese companies emerging and doing such deals. Can you give us paint a picture about the global landscape? Where do we stand? Is this a very strong opportunity for Indian companies to really play a dramatic game that can actually lift our position also?
No, I think one thing which you talked of China, one myth which I think they've broken is that innovation is only possible in the US or in Europe. So I think it's feasible for us to leverage and understand from China as to what are the key drivers which shifted the capability. Everything which is possible in China because it's a different type of economy was feasible for India. But how can we still achieve the outcome that they achieved? But doing something which is feasible for India. At the same point of time, I think as the economy is progressing and prospering, market access, ability to pay for drugs, changing insurance environment should also change the structure of Indian pharma market. So I see opportunity both in innovation as well as in ability to grow in other parts of our business.
So I think, sir, you have been a role model for many years. Who have been your role models?
If you look at people who established the industry in India, say Parvinder Singh or Dr. Hamid or Anji Reddy, I mean, they've clearly helped India chart out a path so that they can be successful. And there's something to learn from all of them. So like if you look at UN Mehta, I think personal for Sun Pharma, that has been a great role model. So I think huge contribution that say Zaidas, Mr. Modi and Ramanbhai Patel. So lot to learn from all of them.
Both Shanghvi and Saldanha retain their initial excitement for the wide possibilities open to Indian pharma. Shanghvi built a $45 billion company by refusing to believe that small markets stay small. Saldanha built a global drug by refusing to recognize failure as the final verdict. Is the industry taking notes? We certainly hope so. That's it for today. This episode was produced by Anirban Chaudhary and sound designed by Amrit Reggie. Corner Office Conversation is a podcast where we talk to the most interesting business and thought leaders from India and the world. It comes to you on Mondays, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening.